What is up, everybody? Today on a very special edition of Make It Cozy, we're going to review the Mecpow 2-in-1 welding machine. Now, these fine folks, they took the risk to get in contact with me out of the blue, and they said, hey, you want to review this welder, being an amateur maker, amateur welder, such as myself? And I said, heck yeah, let's do it. So I'm going to give you my honest opinion. All the links for this machine, the Mecpow website, are going to be down below. I'm going to give you my honest review at the end, what works, what doesn't work, and what is awesome, what could be done better, you know what I mean? So I'll give you my honest opinion. And I've got not one, not two, but three. I got 3 different projects in mind. So let's go ahead and get to it. All right, we're back. So I sourced some steel from the local steel place, and I have some pieces, parts that are relatively cheap so that I can put some concepts together to put this guy through the ringer. Now, I'm not going to get in the weeds about exactly what I am making. I'm just going to give you a big picture concept, and I will likely make a few shorts that kind of break down the detail a little bit later on so that you can get the true build. But the point of this video, like I said before, is to put this guy through the test and review it. So basically what I'm going to do with this flat sheet right here is that I went to templatemaker.com. I've printed off this octahedron template right here. And what I want to try to do is just make basically 2 cups. So I will cut a piece out, put the template on there, fold the octahedron into 2 like cones. I'm not going to make a full 3D octahedron, but I'll just have 2 pieces, and then I can tack the seam and then have it together for maybe some succulents or just a container. You can put like some jelly beans in there or some Werther's Original, you know, like something like that, you know, give it to your grandma for a gift. The other thing that I was intending to do with this bar right here is to whatever leftover piece that I have an idea that was kind of inspired from inventory, and I'll put a link down below to their inspiration. But basically what I want to do is to make this hexagonal piece with the bar. That way I can tack, and I can kind of get a few projects that'll put both the MMA, the manual metal arc stick together, as well as the MIG. That way it gets kind of, you know, a full review for you. So that's going to be project number 2. And then with the leftover pieces from here, I have this angle iron that's, it's like, what, 1/8 of an inch and 3 feet long. I intend on trying to make like a welded, basically rectangle, and I'll put some other pieces, parts together, and that way I can make like a lamp holder. It'll make more sense later on, but that's big picture concept. So like I said before, I'll probably make some shorts that go into more detail of the builds with these guys. I don't want to take away from here, so let's go ahead and do some movie magic and move on. Baba boosh. So I got all my stuff fabricated and ready for welding, and I will give the review afterwards, but I just want to kind of explain the process just to give you a heads up as to what I'm doing based on the knowledge that I have. I got my little octahedron pieces. In terms of the review of the welder, I want to pull the weld down these guys because this is where it was just kind of folded together, and I want to make sure that the seam is good there. I want to pull this with the manual metal arc or the MMA stick welder. That way I can get really good penetration, because my understanding is that if I push the weld up, then there's going to be a lot of coverage. But I don't want to deal with a big puddle and all the slag later, because I want them to still be uniform in shape, and I don't want to have to grind all that stuff off later. So I kind of just wanted to explain that so I can just kind of montage the welding aspect, and then I can give you my final review shortly. So let's get to it. So I stuck the stick on the positive side, and then I have the ground clamp on the negative, which is connected to my piece. And then I'm gonna fire this guy up, and then we'll get ready to rock. So let's do this. So this guy's super lightweight. I don't know if I said that earlier, which is very nice. And I want to make sure that I set my voltage accordingly. And so they say this is like a 3mm MMA stick. So first off, probably not going to win any beauty pageants, but like I said, I am an amateur and it is holding together. Now I'm gonna put a little extra on the fronts here and then we'll get rolling. That's it for the stick. I used the whole thing. And that was just one project, so that worked out pretty well. So there's my welds. Again, don't judge me on the beauty. Let's just focus on the function. Get this guy out the way. So I think, as far as striking the arc goes, I definitely had better luck with this model. My buddy, who is a certified welder, was telling me, like, you have to strike it like a match, like an old, you know, like Bing Crosby doing the, you know, lighting the pipe. It's kind of like that. And I was like, oh, Bing Crosby lighting the pipe. I can definitely do that, dude, no problem. So he was like, dope. And this one was way easier to strike than my other model that I currently used in other videos. I'm not gonna say the brand because I'm pretty sure it doesn't matter. Just know that this one was easier. So that is pretty dope. And granted, I did need to go over some of the other welds, but that's just a mistake of my own. And just experimenting with pushing versus pulling. And it seemed like whenever I was pushing, I did want to get the thicker weld, so that's what's up. So I'm going to clean these up and let this cool, and then we can start the next one. Real quick, fast and dirty. This thing is pretty easy to get your spool on. All you need to do is take off this cover right here. The spool's gonna unwind, go through the dingus right here. This little guy comes in and out of place. Relatively easy. And then you wanna make sure you just twist this right lefty-loosey. This comes out and you can see we're already set up for 0.8. And that is the spool that came with the set. So I'm gonna wind this and then we'll get back. So first thing you want to do is do the idiot check. Make sure that you go from your stick welding into your flux core MIG. And so I got it on 0.8 right here in the front, as you can see. And then we just want to spool up this wire. I would imagine that with the extra addition here that I'm not used to with the cord, and then swapping the configuration, that is what triggers, for lack of a better phrase, haha, pun intended, the spooling action of your reel. Now, don't do what I did. Make sure that you keep a pretty good grasp on this guy, because mine kind of spaghettied up, unfortunately, and pretty sure that's not good for the machine. Especially trying to wire it. You see how it's like stalling? That's going to become annoying. That's my fault. It even says it in the instructions, but, you know, take it for what it's worth. There we go. There's the piece. So let's go ahead and get rolling. So I am a little bit more comfortable with the MIG aspect of it, or flux core rather. So I have this guy set. It says for the 0.8 that you want to be at around 50 to 120 amps on your current. And so this first one here, I just wanted to do a little test so I didn't blow out my figure. But this one, I just did my first initial test go, and it was pretty good. I got pretty good penetration on the back right here. This one, I went slower in my execution and just kind of really built that puddle. This one, you can see there's a little bit of blow through, but it didn't completely go out the other side, but it just doesn't look good. This one was the one that you saw me do, and I just kind of took it. The manual recommends about 50 centimeters a minute, which for me is hard to visualize. I had to do the calculations for, you know, if you're a nerd like me, that's about 8 millimeters a second. And that is something that I can keep a better tally of because of my, my brain. So there it is. I got no problem striking the arc. I've got good penetration going through. As you can see, it's blasting through the other side. It's very thin though too, right? So I don't want to, that's why I went MIG on this one. So in my experience, if I go stick welder, I'm gonna blast through the outside. So that is a lesson learned for me. It's got a good, you know, it joined the metal, absolutely, it welded. However, I'm gonna clean this one up and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes. All right, we got all three of the projects in their welding stages done. So let's go ahead and check everything out real quick. All right, so let's go ahead and start out with the first project, which was like gonna be the frame for my up and coming lamp. And so we see, like, I grinded this down pretty well. We've got really good penetration on both ends of the thing. Granted, I did go from both angles because this is 1/8 of an inch. And I'll tell you, for using the MMA stick welder on this, I was very, like I said, I was pleasantly surprised. It was very easy to strike an arc. I was gonna say it was daunting because I didn't think that with a model like this that I would get, you know, this thing is good, buddy. When hitting it from both sides, now I've got really good adhesion and everything seems pretty well sturdy. Granted, it's not gonna be very load bearing, but I don't need it to be either because it's just a lamp. So very pleasantly surprised with this. And again, definitely a confidence builder. The next thing that I did was I wanted to go for my little octahedron halves. And again, I blew out the 16 gauge metal sheet. Well, I wouldn't even say sheet metal, but the 16 gauge metal here using the MMA stick welder, in which case I swapped over to the flux core MIG, which very pleasantly surprised because I got everything the way that I wanted, even considering the fact that I kind of thinned out the walls here, but I went ahead and just made everything pretty well uniform. And then I'll paint these or do something. I don't know. I have to protect them from the elements somehow. I don't want them to start rusting, unless that's the aesthetic. But the point of the story is that this one was the one that I blew out. And as you can see, right, it's filled all of the crevices, which is, again, excellent. So the last thing that I did is that I went MIG once again with using some different kind of weld action with the 1/8 of an inch steel and the 16 gauge together. As you can see, right, I got pretty good penetration through here. I feel confident with that. And then you can see that, like, I'm starting out really not so great, but then we started getting a little bit. The edges, right, were the ones that I started out on, and then I started getting a little bit. This looks more like dimes, like we're rolling dimes, but hey, it's all with practice, right? You got to practice. And this is obviously, right, this is Stan. So for my experiments with HDPE later, really good. So the last thing that I wanted to check was, this was the bead that I ran with the nozzle attached right here. And then this one was the one where I had taken it off, just to see if there was any difference between running a bead with and without. As I ran the two at relatively the same speed, as far as I could kind of gauge it based on that 8 millimeters a second situation I talked about earlier, this one I feel like is the better weld, right? Because this one is spotty at best. This looks like dots, even though I was trying to do the, you know, caterpillar. This one I did the caterpillar, and it looks a lot better, at least in my opinion. Those of you could tell me in the comments. So if we flip this around, right, you can see penetration is still pretty good. This one's got some bubblage on the other side, which I'm not really sure what's going on there, but just take that for what it's worth. So I would recommend doing this with the nozzle cap on. So those are some of the pluses. Some of the other things I wanted to talk about is just the size of this guy. Like, big things come in small packages, right, that you saw. This thing weighs like 11 pounds. It's very light, it's very sleek, and it looks very modern, which is nice. You get a lot from it, being that it's, you know, A, it doesn't take up a lot of real estate, B, it's not very heavy. And so if you are budget conscious and real estate conscious for your shop, this thing is hitting all the check marks. So that's really good. The other thing that I'll eat my words on is that I think I said earlier that I wasn't going to use this just because of how, like, I mean, it looks cheap, right? But I used it quite a bit. I would use the little hammer bits in order to get into some of the smaller crevices that I couldn't fit my ball peen hammer into, which is kind of nice. And then these wires, like, I was using this throughout all three of these projects. and like there's like 1 or 2 little bends in the wire itself. Like I thought these were going to be cheap and thin, but it actually stood up pretty well. So eat my words, right? Like I do have a thicker wire brush than this one, but this one hit the mark very well, considering all things considered. So like big shout out. I really appreciate Ella who reached out to me on my page to give me the opportunity to review this, and it's pretty dope. I recommend it. Now the last thing and the most important to me is that, well, it's kind of like a twofold, but I've probably said this a dozen times, and I'm a very budget conscious YouTube channel. And I would say the accessibility of this is pretty budget friendly. Again, the link is in the description. You can make that judgment call for yourself, but you get 2 machines in one, and granted, it's very user friendly. I'm an amateur. Again, I've said it throughout this whole video, but I was able to strike an arc with the MMA stick welder, no problem. I felt very like intimidated by the fact that I have weld projects in mind, but I am just too afraid to start. Even though I've had like past experience, then, you know, it's just that intimidation factor of starting something new. Is it gonna be correct? What's the learning curve? And all this kind of stuff. So that's all well and good. I think this machine definitely will help build that confidence with the stick welder and with MIG, the flux core. In my opinion, MIG is easier, so that's why I chose out that one last, right? You can even see on my board that I have stuff where it's just like, hey, Cozy, weld something. See? Weld something. All right, so just to wrap up, right, things they did do right, I think they really did right. Price, usability, accessibility, and confidence booster, all very good things. The other things, let's talk about the rooms for improvement. One of them is obviously the mask, right? I think that an auto darkening situation would be good. I understand for the price points, it may be a little bit hard, but it's just, hey, right out of the box, you're still being able to use it. So it is what it is, right? It's still pretty good. The second thing is, in the manual itself, there was a lot of good tips and tricks on how to set this guy up, which is very nice. One thing that I would like to have seen though, is that they talk about like the feed for the MIG. They talk about the stick diameter for your MMA stick welder. What I would like to see is maybe a little more of the current situations for different gauges of metal. Like if you have 24 versus 16 versus 1/4 inch versus 1/8 inch, and then what is the maximum capacity that this thing you should be pushing it to? Like I didn't know that 1/8 of an inch was gonna be good. I just had preconceived notions about, again, the size, right? Size doesn't always matter, but I didn't really go in with big confidence on the 1/8 of an inch frame, but it worked, and it worked just fine. And once I saw this, I was like, oh, it was like a light bulb going off, like, oh, I can do this. Like, this is great, right? So that would have been a little bit like, probably would have given me more confidence going into it had they had put that in the manual. Lastly, so the charts that did talk about the different wires and sticks for MMA, it mentioned voltage and it talks about current. Whenever I manipulated the voltage knob, I'm not really seeing a lot of manipulation going on, but it's clear whenever I manipulate the current, and maybe I could have played with that a little bit more. Maybe it's just something that I'm just not familiar with, but I think the manual could have maybe talked about that a little bit better. The other thing too is that whenever you go through the manual push button for going through MMA, 0.8 MIG, and 1.0 MIG, there's also a lift TIG. I'm familiar with TIG as a welding concept, but the manual doesn't really talk about that. I'm not really sure why it's there, unless there is a capability of this being a 3-in-1. Like maybe you can buy another accessory that can make this machine TIG ready, and you can just replace the nozzles and the feeds, right? So, or not the nozzles, but the tips for the plugs. If that's the case, it probably should have said that. I was very confused. I don't remember reading anything about it. Maybe it is in there and I just didn't look hard enough with a microscope or whatever. But yeah, that was kind of confusing. So yeah, those are the really big 3 deficits, if you want to even call them deficits. One being the mask, right? Good out of the box, but you might want to consider getting something more long-term if you do decide that this is for you. Talk more about the different gauge and thicknesses of the metal versus the current and your other specifications that you can manipulate the machine for. Again, talk more about the voltage knob. I didn't really get a lot of input on that, and also what lift TIG capabilities there are with this machine, if any. I mean, there's an option, so like say, hey, if you're also interested in lift TIG, consider buying this accessory from Mecpow. Like that would be, like just put a 1 line in there, you know what I mean? So that is my wrap up. I highly recommend this guy for a budget-friendly skill building concept, right? This thing fits the bill. It's also very user-friendly. Again, I highly recommend it. These are just the beginning stages of my projects here. So if you want to check out more on those, I will release some like little short videos, not like a YouTube short, but like a cozy short, you know what I'm talking about? So I'm probably gonna bust those out relatively quickly so that we can knock those at like a weekly or a bi-weekly basis. So I appreciate you sticking around for that if that is something that you're into. Another thing too is that I recently started a PayPal donation page, which I'll link down below in the description. I am a small up and coming channel, so I don't really have that much to offer. But if you guys would like to make a donation to help fund this channel, if you like the stuff that I'm doing, I would really appreciate that because every little bit helps. And with that being said, stay tuned for the other projects and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.